right, so it is now 7 o'clock. I'm going to go ahead and open the meeting of the Paxton Select Board. We are here in the training room at the Public Safety Complex, and today's date is Tuesday, October 10th, 2023. Following our regular session, we will enter executive session to discuss the collective bargaining for the police, I guess it's not collective bargaining, but negotiation for the police lieutenant contract pursuant to MGL Chapter 30A, Section 21-2, and also to conduct strategy with respect to collective bargaining for the police union pursuant to MGL Chapter 30A, Section 21-3. So first on the agenda is an announcement pertaining to the recipient of Paxton's Boston Post cane, and we have Rich Fenton here to do that. Come on up, Rich. I just want to say I'm so happy to see you here.
I know. Me too.
As you know, I'm filling in for Anita. She's at the polls right now. She will be until 8:30 tonight. As a result, she will not be able to discuss with you the Council on Aging bylaw changes as well.
Okay.
So I'm just filling in with her with respect to the Boston Post cane. In 1909, the Boston Post newspaper distributed canes to about 700 towns throughout much of New England. These canes were to be transmitted by officials to the individual in the town who was celebrated as the oldest person in the town at that time. The Historical Commission revived this celebration in Paxton in 2015 with the award of the cane to Mrs. Virginia Kimball. We now have the opportunity to continue this tradition of awarding the cane to Mr. Linwood Erskine. At the age of 100, he is now the oldest representative in the town of Paxton. Representative Kim Ferguson will also present Mr. Erskine with a certificate from the Commonwealth acknowledging this goal. This is a reproduction of the cane that will be presented to him, and on the head of it, it says, if I get it right side up there, presented by the Boston Post to the oldest citizen of Paxton, Massachusetts, to be transmitted. So this is the cane that he's going to be awarded with. This celebration will be held Sunday, October 22nd at 2 p.m. in the John Bauer Senior Center on 17 West Street. The Historical Commission welcomes those who wish to join Mr. Erskine in this celebration. Thank you. Are there any questions with respect to the celebration?
No,
Pretty
thank
straightforward.
you. Yep, thank you so
Okay.
much.
Thank you.
Okay, great. So next up, we're going to then pass over the discussion about the bylaws from the Council on Aging because Anita is otherwise disposed of tonight. I don't have Judy Hadstadt here yet to provide an update from the Board of Health. We'll pass that over and see if she's able to come. So I'm going to move right into then the joint meeting with Finance, which we have on with our Finance Committee members that are here. And so, Mark, would you like to call your meeting to order?
Yeah, we have a quorum, so I'd like to call the meeting of the Finance Committee on October 10th at 7:05 p.m. to order.
Excellent, thank you. So, Mark, I know you had an agenda posted, which I actually don't have in front of me at the moment, but I'm happy to let you sort of run the show, if you'd like, to start things off.
Sure. Well, actually, our agenda, which was sent out and could possibly be found on the website right now, item 3 spoke to the proposed fiscal year 25 budget guidance. Item 4 spoke to the review and discussion of interim town administrator and possible involvement of the reserve fund. Both of those items are your item 2.4 on your own agenda.
Yes.
So I think they marry each other perfectly, and with that said, I turn it back to you to speak to items 2.4.
Okay, excellent. So If we look at this now, we have, if we want to start with the budget guidance, I have this up on my computer here, and let's see. I don't know why that is gonna, let me see if I can get that down. Hold on. Okay. All right, so we have the budget guidance. This is something that we had talked about at the last meeting, and we had some preliminary discussion about what we thought should go out to department heads. Mark, you indicated that you'd like it to be a joint effort between finance and select board, and indeed, our select board goals say that we'd like it to be that way as well, so I appreciate that. And Mark, you also sent along some feedback on the revised budget guidance, which I think you were on point with much of it. So if you don't mind, I'd like to start there, because I think it's a good jumping off point. So if I look at, let me just pull this up.
Would you dare call up my rendition that I sent with
Yeah.
red markings?
We certainly can. Heather, can you pull that one up and share it? Give her a second.
Are we pulling up Julia, the current guidance, or Mark's email?
Can you pull up Mark's guidance that has his revisions on it?
Okay, yep, just give me a minute.
Okay.
So Julia, because the Finance Committee hasn't met, could I speak to a little bit of background
Please,
on this?
go ahead,
This-
yeah.
This actually is the second rendition of a letter that the town administrator is hoping to send out to the department heads regarding their budget. This one right here, I'm happy to say, includes two comments that we had made to the first edition. The first edition made reference to a sizable, and the letter quantified the increase likely to come forward from the Wachusett Regional School District, and we spoke against quantifying it.
Yep.
The old adage, whoever says their number first loses, so we didn't want to say our number. Secondly, I think there was some well-intended mention of the COLA that, worst case, maybe it would be zero, but we thought that included in an initial rendering would be sending the wrong message, and I think the board agreed with those two suggestions, and those two are not seen in this second rendition, which we thank you for taking those out.
Yeah. So there's a couple of things that, it's not up there yet. Let me see if I can share mine.
Is it not showing, Julia?
It's not, no.
All right, hold on, let me just stop share and try again. Maybe I just need to be more specific as to what page I want to share here. Okay, how about now?
Yep, there you go.
Okay.
All right. So, a couple of small things. I agree with your first couple of changes here. Obviously, September 25th, and again tonight, we're reviewing it and in coordination with finance. Heather, you said in FY24, I estimated additional expenses at around $667K for the major budget drivers. Is that accurate at FY24? I don't think this is like a hill to die on, but.
No, it's possible I meant FY25. I'd have to go back and look at the original piece.
Okay,
I can try that on my phone while you guys are reviewing this.
okay.
Not to be abundantly anal here, but she said it in FY '24, but it
But it was
relates
about FY
FY '25. I just thought that was a little confusing.
Got it. Got it. So we can work on clarifying that. All right. So then we're some discussion about free cash here. To generate healthy free cash in FY '25 that we so heavily rely on to cover our expenses, and Mark's got his thoughts here, we should not rely on the FY '25 budget to produce free cash by design. And, the existence, result, occurrence, realization of free cash should happen naturally by way of spending less than budgeted, et cetera. I absolutely agree with your thoughts there. So mention of free cash should not be a matter of concern for or focus for department heads. It is town administrator, select board, and finance committee matter. As such, I'd eliminate any mention of reference to it in this budget guidance correspondence. So I invite any thoughts from anybody, actually, other select board members, finance committee members about this discussion about free cash in the budget guidance.
That sentence is, in my mind, correct, but I understand what you're saying, that it doesn't belong in here, because it's not the department heads that generate the local revenues. So, but
I agree. We want them focusing on their departments.
But the Department of Revenue do stipulate that we should be looking to generate free cash. And they put that out in a bulletin. So the statement is correct, but I'm not sure the department heads need to
Worry about
worry
it.
about it.
Right.
Julia, can I add one thing? I wasn't, hopefully, although I'm accused of being thorough on these things, I didn't want to be too technical, but reference to free cash, the way it appears, is literally in contradiction to the financial management policies, the financial reserves section, pages 24, 25, which basically says the town should get away from doing what that first line is saying we are going to do.
Right.
So I just thought it should be eliminated. And then the other point is, it's a finance committee issue, along with the select board, along with the town administrator. It's not necessarily a department head issue.
Right.
That's what I said.
Yep. Yep.
So that's why I thought it should be eliminated. It
Okay.
took me 12 lines to say one line should be eliminated. I apologize, but I wanted to build my case as to why I suggested that.
Okay.
So.
And I don't disagree with you. It sounds like none of us are disagreeing with you on that point. I agree.
I mean, I
So-
think department heads need to be aware of where they can free up cash, but, as they go through their budget year, but it's not necessarily their responsibility to
Worry about where it's
worry
generating
about
from.
the whole
Yeah.
thing,
There is a bit of detail here, after Mark's comments about the position that we find ourselves currently in. And I invite any comments about the level of detail here when we are soliciting information from our department heads. Honestly, it's my opinion that the department heads need to understand our financial position, but that the extent or current actual physical numbers are probably irrelevant, right? It's really more, this is where we are right now, this is the type of budget we want you to submit. And I don't want to lose focus on the intent of the correspondence here, which is simply to provide some, bumpers essentially for what we're looking for out of their budget submissions. Rather, I think when we start providing a significant amount of detail like this, it becomes maybe more nightmarish than it needs to be. So my suggestion for that would be just to simply state that we find ourselves running a deficit and, given our current environment and the choices we had to make last year, we think that it would be best that they submit a level funded budget or whatever we end up deciding tonight. So, moving on, we have this, at their meeting on September 11th, the select board directed my office to put together budget guidance directing departments to, one, prepare a make whole budget. And I think at our last meeting, we discussed maybe doing away with that whole concept of the make whole budget. I understand the point of it. And Heather, correct me if I'm wrong, but the point of a make whole budget would be to understand exactly where we would be if we didn't make, if we allowed departments to put in requests and approved requests as requested last year, and then weren't obviously going to be making any significant requests this year. Where would we be if we hadn't put limitations on them over the last several years? And that's the number that I think you would shoot for in the event that you were going to be requesting an override. So Heather, can you just confirm, is that your intent with the make whole budget?
Yes.
Okay. So I think that's the idea with the make whole budget. That being said, Mark had indicated, and I don't disagree, that having two budgets going could get very confusing. And so I think it's important for us on the back end to have an understanding of potentially where we would be if we hadn't placed limitations on the departments, but ask the departments to just submit the single budget. Is everybody on the same page there?
Yeah, I think I would say the same, same thing, just slightly different. In this rendition right here, it does say whole budget. The minutes of the last meeting said, take whole budget out,
Yeah,
and it's still in. I took it a step further that we have whole budget, we have level funded, level service, and Chicken Little budget. And our position is, we have a lot of faith in the department heads. Give us your best budget. You know what we're up against. Let's not have to do deep cuts or deep additions. It shouldn't be what they want or what they wish for. It should be what they need. And I think there's a tighter way of saying that so that we don't get a first pass at a budget which they're hoping gets through, but it really isn't their best one because they could have lived with something else. I think they get it. I think they know we're up against. I would say, give us your best budget, and then we'll do our job, which is to bring them in, have a Q&A, ask our tough questions, listen to them, let them make whatever presentation they want, and then in the final analysis, if we have to make a cut, we have all that background information on which to rely on. But if we have two of them,
Muddy.
Jeremy's going to like one, as an example, by the way, Jeremy. I'm going to like another one, and Ben's going to want something in the middle. Why not have the one in the middle be the one that gets submitted right in the first place? That's our point.
okay.
And I think it's going to be confusing to department heads, some of which have amazing acumen in presenting these. In other cases, this is challenging for them to prepare and present. So let's not make it any more difficult for them.
Right. So on that note, is there any discussion around what your thoughts are in terms of what to request in maybe more specific than saying, give us your best budget, but do we want to request level services or level funded budget? Or do you want to leave it more open than that?
I'll defer to the other members of the committee, but I would prefer best budget. Because somebody's interpretation of level funded and level service could be entirely different than another department head and entirely different than the finance committee, where best budget is not confusing to any of us. Best, leanest budget that you need to provide the services that the townspeople require, request, and pay for.
Okay.
Adding
So-
the word leanest helped a little bit.
Yep.
To me, that would be, I mean, when you say level funded, and you say, best budget. I don't think realistically any department head is gonna give you a budget with less. It's not in the nature of someone to wanna come back and say, cut it all. I agree with you to the point that you need to have one. I just don't know. You think that the attempt should be made to get better than level funded? I mean, is that, I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, but is that what you mean when you say best budget?
By best budget, I'll go back to what I said a minute ago, what they need in order to provide the service to the townspeople that the townspeople have come to expect, need, and pay for.
So what you're
Whether
saying,
that goes to level funded or level service or
Right.
Chicken Little or whole budget.
Now I understand what you're saying, okay.
yeah. So in my mind, what you're saying is a level service budget. Almost exactly. And, a level services budget is what we requested last year. It's a budget that's going to see the increases from the year prior based on contractual environment, as well as, the cost of all of things going up, So in essence, a level services budget is going to be a little bit higher than last year's budget. A level funded budget would be a budget that is cut a little bit essentially from the year prior because you have to still meet your contractual obligations, but you have to maintain the same bottom line. And so everything else shrinks as your contractual obligations grow per your contracts. And so a level funded budget would be a modestly cut budget. If you're looking for something less than a modestly cut budget, then we need to talk about how to define that. But just so that we're all speaking the same language, I think what you're asking for right now is a level service budget.
I would say yes with this caveat. Maybe it's a level service, but a service that we potentially could do without going forward. So if you say level service, they're going to provide the same 5 services that they provided last year, and maybe one of them could be go the way of the dodo bird. Maybe we don't need it. So by saying level service, they immediately include all the ones that they've traditionally had, as opposed to give some thought that maybe there's one that can be combined with another and we don't need all 5. That's what I was thinking of.
So is it more than a level funded budget you're looking for? You want cuts, you don't want an increase.
Yeah, and the reason I don't like level funded is they could provide those same 5 services, but they cost more this year. So they can't necessarily provide all 5 at the same $100 that was in their budget last year because it costs $120 this year. That's why I think we get tangled up with the
So you're-
definitions of the different budgets.
So it sounds to me like maybe you're looking for something in between those two.
Which
So if-
doesn't have a name, but yes.
It doesn't have a name, right, and it doesn't have a definition. So if we want to do that, I think we need to provide the definition to them
Explain.
so that it's abundantly clear what
Yeah,
we're
the
looking for from
explanation.
them. Yeah.
Don't give it a title, explain it.
Right. And so, and that's exactly what this budget guidance is for. So that's not an unusual or unheard of request. But it's up to us to just define that for them so that they know what the expectation is. So if we wanted to do that, does anybody have any suggestions for how to put that into words? Would you say, we'd ask you to think about your essential services or the essential services that your department provides, and seek to maintain those essential services?
Well, as you know, writing by committee never works, so writing by 2 committees is certainly never going to work. I would suggest that the town administrator lead with a suggestion, and you share it with the select board, I'll share it with the finance committee.
That sounds fine.
Yep.
Heather, are you comfortable with that? Is she there? She might not be there.
She's muted.
I am, sorry, I had to find the right button.
Yep.
So I think to your point about a minute and a half ago, Julia, at this point, so I've already been through, I think this is either 2 or 3 renditions on this on my end. I don't know if it makes sense for me to make a suggestion, have you guys, everyone review it and then come back to try to do another joint meeting. I don't know, other than the way you just described essential services, Julia, another way to describe what we're trying to compromise and come out with here, but I think I think we're at the point where we need to figure out, what we're exactly asking people. I would disagree with the earlier statement that people don't know what a level funded or a level services budget is. I think they do. I talk to all of the department heads on a regular basis. I don't think they're gonna try to say something is level services and have a service that they no longer need. I think they would, easily get rid of that and maybe even explain why and put something in its place if they had to say, this wasn't working, but this works instead. But I think it's really important to be as clear as humanly possible with direction to department heads, because I think putting something out there that someone's going to interpret multiple different ways is not going to get us on the track of getting to a balanced budget.
Right. One thing I want to say is we also have to be careful of taking away department head's ability to have a discussion with both the FinCom and the select board, right? So I don't want to be too prescriptive because I don't think I've ever seen a time where people have submitted budgets and everyone said, perfect, let's go. So we always know there's going to be some level of interaction. And we should just be mindful of the fact that as I think Mark said, the department heads are very keen of what they want, what they need. And I think part of our discussions is to ferret out a want and a need. But without seeing that, it's tough for us to make that decision. So, if we're content with the services that were provided, one thing might be is level services to start with, knowing, and that's part of what what the dialogue in this should say is, if you come with level services, we're going to take something because we don't have the same budget. We have a deficit this year. So let them know we want level services, but there's going to be less of a budget. And let them, work their magic. And if they come in and they're torn, let us, have that discussion.
All right. Okay. So if we are in that section, Heather, if you can scroll to the bottom of that page.
Yeah, hang on one second. I was pulling up my draft to edit it. Okay. All right. Are we back to the right one?
Yep.
See Reading?
I see your cursor, yeah. So can you go down to where it says FY25 budget dates? There we go. Okay, so this is, I think, where we're at now. So I think we've given Heather an idea of what we're looking for. Then, does anybody have any further comments around level services, level funded, thoughts of how to say this or anything like that?
It's tough to say it in a way that, no, it's just a tough thing to say.
It is.
I think, you say level funded, someone says we're gonna get the same bottom line dollars that we got last year. You say level service, they're gonna assume that we're gonna keep the services the same, and
Yep.
I think it's not being doomy and gloomy, but there's gotta be some emphasis on, it's gonna be lean, it's
Yeah.
gonna be tight, there is a deficit, and it's, you've gotta put your best effort forward. It's a hard thing to say. I don't like it when, I know I'm facing it, I don't think anyone who does a budget does. It's just tough.
Right.
I think level funded speaks to the core more than level service, at least from our perspective of trying to balance the budget. It might be something different to the, department heads, but
I guess one concern with level funded would be is they could take stuff out that we don't even have a discussion about. I just say that's a risk.
that's a valid point, yeah.
That's a risk.
Yeah, they could have a level funded budget, but, but they're not gonna have any ambulance service,
That would be terrible.
but they're level funded. So, I think you've heard best, you've heard lean, and you've heard let the finance committee do their job. That's kind of our message, I think. How that gets language smith and wordsmith will defer to Heather, but I think those are at least 3 messages we're sending out.
You know, I think typically with department heads, we have to have some faith in them that they're going to, when faced with a, limited budget, that they're going to find a way to provide as much of the service that they formerly provided with the new funds that they have available to them. And a department head is probably going to be the best person to say, if I'm faced with potentially having a cut of a certain percent, how can I still provide the best service that I can provide? And so I say this just because Ben's comment with the, I'm afraid that they might take something out that we don't have a discussion about. I think we do have to, the department heads understand their department the best. And so we can come in and try to quarterback them a little bit in terms of what they're choosing to cut and what they're choosing not to cut, but I think we have to rely on them as the expert in a lot of cases. So I just caution you a little bit about, that kind of thought process. So say, for instance, the DPW, they come in and they've said, okay, you know what, I think we can cut some certain amount of salt from the budget or whatever, because we can replace it with sand, because that's actually a viable way to save a little expense on the DPW side. I have to rely on the DPW superintendent to be the expert there and tell us that we're still gonna get, effective, snow melt and traction out of sand, as opposed to sand and salt mixture, right? And so what I'm saying is that they are the expert. They really do know how to run their department the best. So while I think the back and forth is good, I think we still need to just make sure that we defer to them on a lot of instances.
I think we do.
So Heather, do you have a clear as mud idea of what we're looking for in the next guidance?
Well,
Yeah, I'm gonna need a little bit more. Perhaps I'm happy to do whatever the 2 boards would like me to do. I just don't know if my ESP is gonna be there. So if you guys can be a little more precise, I'm happy to change just whatever you want. But if you can give me a sentence or 2, I'll just substitute it in.
Let me change directions. I'll take a stab at it.
Okay. That sounds reasonable.
It
Just
won't be anywhere near as lengthy as the red print there, but in 2 sentences, I'll take a stab,
Okay,
send it to the board and send it to Heather and the finance committee.
that's reasonable.
Yeah, because I think I'm clear, I think we're clear, so to help Heather, happy to do that.
Okay, that works for me. So under this FY25 guidance, we have, you can't see that currently, but we have number 1 was level funded budget. That's where we were. We decided we're going to change that wording a little bit. And Mark, I'll rely on you to kind of come up with some thoughts. And then number 2 was non-union employees COLA. And Heather has written, for FY25, all non-union employees fall into the wage comp chart approved by the select board for FY25. The wage comp chart has been updated to reflect a 2.5% wage adjustment. This will allow, unless there is an extraordinary reason, for employees to remain on the same step but have the entire chart undergo a 2.5% overhaul. I'm not sure this is needed in this guidance, but I'm interested in your thoughts.
Well, it's telling as I read it, that they stayed on the same step, but their
they're gonna get
compensation's increased by 2.5.
Yeah,
So they'll need to refer to the wage, the chart, to be able to establish what they need to put in the budget.
this is just what,
So that gives the department head the opportunity to know what his increases are gonna be based on where his.
based on the wages.
Yeah.
Okay, I can get behind that.
Okay.
So the idea for why to do a 2.5% overhaul too if you think about it, if you hire someone new, right, next year, that way it gives you the ability to try to keep up with the cost of everything, right? So that you're hiring someone at a 2.5% increase at the lowest rate if they were an A1, so that you're not sitting there and what happens if you just keep moving people up a step and not actually adjusting the overall chart, you end up having someone who you go to hire and it's like $14.93 for step one, and McDonald's is at $30 at that point. So it's trying to keep time-wise up, and that says extraordinary reason. So again, someone has great performance or there's a reason to increase them up a step, then they would put in to increase them a step. But otherwise, it's the automatic assumption and can be programmed into the sheet that people would go up 2.5% if they're non-union, non-contract.
Okay. Does that sound reasonable?
We were okay with it.
Okay.
Yep. Can you scroll back though, Julia? I think there was one other section,
Heather, can you scroll back a little bit on that page?
The dates.
the date.
The dates.
And I've highlighted the date of November 15th, which sounded good back on September 25th, but it may not sound as good on October 10th, and we don't have a final product now. I had suggested December 1st. Just a suggestion, totally, completely would defer to the town administrator, to whom the department heads report to, but that seems a little tight. Maybe they know it's coming, and they'll be prepared for it, but once again, I would say when we first drafted it, it was 2.5 weeks ago. So is that a moving target or not? That's in the form of a question.
Yeah, and I agree I would defer to Heather. Heather, what's your thoughts?
I think it's fine to push the date back. As Mark had said, we originally said, November 15th, but that's when this original rendition, I think, was in September. So that made a lot of sense. Generally, about a month is usually probably good. If we don't get this, it all depends on what's going on with the next level of guidance approval. If everyone's going to be good with things today and they go out next week, November 15th or December 1st, either way is fine. If this doesn't go out to the select board's next meeting on October 25th, you couldn't do anything sooner than December 1st because you have to give people at least a month.
Okay. Are we good with the date?
So, I'm good with the date, but maybe for ease, I think we know what we're talking about. We're on the same page, I believe. So if Mark gets that information to Heather and then you agree to it, it can go out for me. I don't think we need to again.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay.
So then
That's good.
So then December 1st or whatever date you want, I don't mind. But
Yep.
I think we don't need to come back.
Right, just to expedite getting it out.
Yep. I'm sure what Mark comes up with will be fine.
Mark
that
looks
okay,
highly
Mark?
amused by
Yep.
this.
Okay.
Okay. All right.
Thinking I would do it next month, but it looks like I gotta do it tomorrow.
Please.
So,
So if I understood that right, sorry, when we use the AV system on the Zoom, it echoes. I think we just need to figure out where we pull the audio. But so just to follow up, if I understood that correctly, Mark's going to finish the rendition, and if we're good, we're gonna send that out as soon as he's done with it.
Yeah,
You're
after I
gonna
review
send it to
it.
Julia
With his approval.
Okay.
and then copy us, of course, and then,
But we're not going to comment on it. It's going to be Julia's approval.
Yeah, that sounds fine. All right, stipends and capital requests, any questions, comments, or concerns on those two items?
I just think the capital request comment is going to automatically say that it's not worth putting a capital request in. That's my only thought on that.
To me,
That's a
capital
different committee anyway,
Right,
so.
right, yeah, to me, capital requests are completely separate and probably deserve their own guidance from capital, so I would, probably nix that line. Mark,
yeah, I didn't opine on this, because when I was doing that, I was wearing my finance committee hat. But, once again, submit the forms and let the capital improvements planning committee do their jobs.
Right.
Right.
For us to say whether or not it's gonna be a capital exclusion or a debt exclusion, who's to say?
Right. Absolutely. Yep.
So I don't know if we're saying too much here or,
The way I read that is it's just telling department heads, don't put anything
you don't need.
that you don't need in your budget, do it as a capital request, right? There may be some large dollar items under 10,000, but, you know, it's kind of sounding like that. That's, if I read it, that's what I read. It just says that it says no funds predicted in the operating budget.
I understand what you're saying, Jeremy.
I do, but we don't do capital items in the budget.
I mean, by definition, a capital item is an item over 10,000, right?
Right.
But this is just guidance for people. To me, that's gonna, if I'm doing a budget, that's gonna be a value judgment for me. Where I'm saying, you know, I'm shying away from this, or I'm not doing it, or I'll wait for that. And then again, same thing if we trust the department heads, which we do. I think that's, I kind of like that as is to, you know, just to make them at least think about it at that point. Were we thinking it needed to be changed? Was that the discussion?
I think maybe if you worded it different, if you said all capital requests, all capital needs should be funded, or fill out, tell them, you know, if you've got a capital request, put it through the proper channels.
Or would need to be reviewed through the capital or
think
debt
they already
exclusion
know that.
process or something.
Right, or just only have the second line. All capital needs would need to be funded through either capital or debt exclusions.
Sure.
Yeah,
Just-
I think Ben's nailed it right on the head there.
Yeah.
So Heather, so can you just nix the first line there and just say, start with capital A, all capital needs would need to be funded through their capital or debt exclusions?
I can, but I think Mark's gonna do the rendition to this, right?
Well, I think Mark was only gonna provide those two sentences
Oh,
around.
okay, well, then yes, I can.
Yes.
Okay. Around budget forms, Heather, the budget forms is really just your spreadsheet that you used last year, correct?
Yeah, it's last year's spreadsheet updated, so it has what was requested or what was funded last year. And then currently it has two sets of cells in it, which we'll probably still leave, because even if we're only giving direction for one, if there's any changes, it gives space, and it also links everything to, the back. So if there is a desire to change like non-union COLA across the board, you guys can easily do that with one cell to impact all the budget lines. But yeah, so it's essentially last year's workbook, but it's all in one workbook instead of separate Excel sheets.
Okay, so you've seen it already, because it's the same thing that went out last year. I know we worked off of two separate forms last year, the old form and then Heather's rendition of a new form. So the budget forms that she's asking the department heads to fill out this year are just that new form.
So do they have those two columns? The prior year actual and the current year actual year-to-date?
I believe that they do. Heather, is that correct?
That's really the question.
Do they have the prior year actual and then the actual year-to-date?
Yeah, give me 1 second. I'm trying to share my screen, but it's not cooperating at the same time.
Okay.
All right, so can you see my screen?
Yeah.
Yes.
So it doesn't currently have the year-to-date. We can add the year-to-date. The problem with the year-to-date is you wouldn't want us to add it in before December, or actually before like January 15th, or you'd want to do it the first quarter, because otherwise you're just going with a random period of time. But you'll see here, so it had FY24 approved, and then I had the two, first request and the TA recommended, the second request, the TA recommended. But again, we can change that up. The detail sheet, it's by each department with all the breakdown pieces, everything sums up here. And then you go into an individual department. You have all your lines, and same thing as last year. Breaks out, compensation, wages, purchase services, and it gives you FY24 approved, a note for the description, notes down below, as well as the final pieces, and then each one has a wage sheet at the end. I don't know if you can, I think you can see that, right?
Yep.
So, and that's for each sheet,
So that's what she's
if
gonna
that
be
makes sense.
looking for.
Yeah, and we're happy to see that. What we were trying to get away from was, in the past, we were looking at the prior year budget, the current year budget, and the requested budget. So we were comparing budget, never knowing what did they spend? Do they need that budget? Do they need more than what they budgeted? So that's why we were asking for the actual amounts, which I would actually say is in the FinCom bylaws that were just approved, that we would have those two columns. So just wanted to be sure, hadn't seen it, could have asked for it, didn't, now I see it, glad to see it.
Yeah, and at any point in time, the town accountant can run for you a itemization of where all of the accounts are, and just, it'll be in a complete list form, which is actually probably a more cohesive way.
It's nice seeing
you
it
to
on
see it, but-
one sheet.
But I understand what you're saying.
So what are you asking for, Mark? You're asking for FY '24 approved and FY '23 spent?
Right, spent to date.
Was spent to date or spent from the year prior?
The current year that we're in, and I think at
Okay,
the
year to
August
date.
meeting that we had the discussion, the decision was we were gonna use December 31st as the cutoff. So we could.
And is that
compare-
what, is that what you guys want, December 31st? I can put in that column, but I'm not gonna, unfortunately, I won't be the one who will be able to populate that one column.
Is this the same data you're looking at on, say, the monthly expenditure report?
Yeah, the expenditure report is really the better place to get that information
And-
from.
Right, and
'Cause all-
that's getting updated weekly.
Right, exactly. It's getting updated
So
constantly.
Would this be, what we were say, you know, if that's to that date, so could we use that? Is that the data we could just plug it in there?
We wouldn't plug it in. I think Heather would plug it in. but
Okay.
I'm trying to get away from
Different
having a
forms.
budget sheet and then having an expenditure sheet that some may have access to, some may bring, some may not. Somebody may be looking at one that's a week old. So that's why I was hoping it would all be under one roof on one form. That's a good source to go back to and rely on, but if it could be on one sheet, I think it would be more helpful. And I say December 31st, if it happens to be November 1st.
Yeah.
Just as long as it's something that we can kind of annualize.
Yeah.
Keeping in mind that expenditures don't always take place in an annualized way.
Correct.
They could
And-
be heavy in the first 6 months and none in the first 6 months, so I just think that gives us.
So I
a
think the
better
biggest
read.
thing I would need from FinCom and the select board is to just know what the cutoff date is. If you want November 1st, we can do that, keeping in mind that usually, you know, it might be a couple days after that before I have the most updated report for November 1st. But you can see right here, like what you're usually looking for is you want the payroll and the bill warrants to settle out. So I usually go to someone who's pretty solid on their budget. So like the town accountant, as of October 10th, she's at 25%, right? So that's 1/4 of the year. So that gives me the notion that everyone should be about 25%. I can plug in those numbers of what's already expended, but just keep in mind that when you do that, just like when we go over these reports every quarter, it's really important to understand what you're looking at because some things get expended at a much faster rate than others, right? So while wages are generally pretty customary and, you know if you're ahead or behind schedule based on where you are in the year, other things like purchase services and supplies and so forth, some people wait towards the end for them, and some things, like we pay for a subscription up front. So if you look down on some of them, even FinCom's a good example, you guys are at 98.82% of your budget, and we're only a quarter of the year, but you're through that because there's only one item in your line, and it's for your membership. So I think, maybe we can do a combo, maybe we'll do I can throw it into the Excel sheet, but I think it's equally important for the FinCom to make sure everyone has a copy of this that runs the same date as the actual Excel sheet report does, because otherwise you're without the background information, and someone may look at this and might be panicking, or might be like, oh, town account and purchase services is only 3.64%. They definitely don't need how much money they're asking for that line, when, they might not have conferences till the summer.
Heather, I really appreciate what you're saying. I think what I panicked more, and correct me if I'm wrong, is how much is left over at the end of the year. And that's why we want to know how much is spent. If I looked at last year's at the end, at the one that ended 6/30, minus the two big chunks, there was like $555,000.
So I completely agree with you.
And
I think just based on that, the more telling number for you is gonna be the year end for the prior year, as opposed to the
that's
spent to date.
yeah, for sure.
I would forego the year-to-date, as long as we had the prior year actual.
Yeah, so I think that I think that's an easier number for Heather to be able to plug in, because it's not a moving target.
Right.
And it's probably more telling for you.
Right.
Yeah. So Heather, can you do that?
So if I'm understanding correct, you'd like to see, and I don't know if I'm currently sharing my screen, I probably pushed a button and I'm no longer. So you would like to see FY '23 actuals for those lines and not so much year to date, is that what I'm understanding?
Yes.
Say you want to look at original budget, ending balance, percent expended.
Yep.
Just those three. You don't need to put all six.
Yeah.
So I just want to be clear, because it sounds like we might be saying two different things here. So right now you see this shows FY '24 approved. So this is what the budget is going into the year. It sounds like it's helpful for people to know what was actually expended the year before, because when this budget was approved, we hadn't finished the fiscal year yet. So people want to know how much money was essentially unused in those departments. And then you want to also look at what you still want a year to date of November 1st, or am I getting confused there?
No.
No, I don't think we need the year to date.
Be nice
So-
to have, but if it's gonna be too much work, we'll forego.
Just the last year.
Yeah, so they
Last
can look
year's
at the expenditure
expenditure.
report for the year to date. But if we can put in, on that spreadsheet, the actuals for the prior year, that would be super helpful.
Okay, and you want this for every single line, you just want it for high level? So this right here, right, this is high level, it's departmental. When you get down here, you have expense detail. And then you have the independent department sheets. Do you want it all the way down to the independent department sheets? Or can I just start it with the expense detail sheet and show that information? Is that okay with everyone if I do it just here?
Well, the short answer is the more detail, the better. But if it's somehow consolidated, the department head's gonna be prepared that we're gonna ask for more information to drill down deeper. And as a
This is-
footnote to all this, I just want to make sure that everybody knows, we're simply asking for what is in our newly amended Finance Committee bylaws. So we're not making up rules as we go along. We've been thinking about this and talking about this for over a year and a half. So we want more information. We're more than willing to make it as easy as possible for the town administrator and the accountants. But we'd like to reserve the right to maybe ask for additional information to compare the full prior year with the full prior year amount that was budgeted. To speak to Jeremy's point, we're all happy to see free cash, but where's it coming from? It either comes from more revenue than you budgeted, or spending less expenses than you budgeted. That could be a very helpful tool as we work toward balancing our budget.
Yeah.
That's all.
Okay, so how is this marked? So this is the expense detail sheet. So this wraps everything up to this page. So like you go down to the select board page, all of this information here goes up to the summary page, but it's a lot easier for me to add additional columns for this stuff than to go in and have to manually update a couple hundred sheets. So if you're okay with it, I have here FY '23 approved, right? So that will tell you what they got approved last year. It will tell you FY '23 actual, so what they actually ended up spending last year. You have FY '24 approved, so the current fiscal year, and then the current fiscal year to date, November 1st. Do you also want a percentage, or are you good with those four those 3 added columns.
If you have time on your hands and you want to fill that column, we'll take it, otherwise you can delete it.
Okay, yeah, because I honestly don't think you're gonna get good information out of that November 1st
No.
number. Yeah, okay. So,
And if that'll be what, a third, right?
yeah. So, you know, if you're finding yourself with time on your hands, Heather, knock yourself out, but I don't
I don't think I will
It's
have
on
that
the,
much time on my
website
hands
if
for
we
that, but,
yeah,
okay. But everyone's good with these columns, though, otherwise, for a starting point.
Yes.
yeah.
Yes.
I think everybody is good with it. Okay,
Awesome.
all right, so I think that completes our budget guidance. Any closing remarks or thoughts?
The next steps.
The next steps. Bear with me. So, oh, yes, that's an important comment. Thank you. So Heather, you had written that please contact Donna to set up an appointment with me the first or second week of January, but I don't know that you're going to be here then.
No, I won't. That was probably last
Yeah,
year's
just
number,
I've
so
got
yeah, we
my-
can just,
my email.
if budgets are due December 1st, it would be
Under the,
early the second week of December, if that's the date we stick to.
Okay.
We just try to get everyone in.
Yeah. Okay. So that's fine. So you just so that you know there needs to be a change on that line. Okay. Perfect. So we've gotten through that. All right. What else did we have, Mark? Let's see.
We had, I think you were gonna begin a discussion on I don't know if 2-4, speaking about funding for the town administrator, gets ahead of 4.2, which is talking about a town administrator,
Yeah.
interim town administrator.
Yeah. So we have. Are you guys planning on hanging out tonight for the meeting? Because I think there's a couple of things that we might want your input on. And the town, I mean, that we have a whole other discussion to happen on the interim town administrator. But I would, of course, what time is it now? 7:56. But I think that there's also other questions that I have for you. So, trying to figure out a way to not waste your time.
Well, maybe if we could make some preliminary comments, and then maybe, I think the preliminary comments would lead to our being able to adjourn. Some of us can stay, and maybe the finance committee reconvenes a meeting later on. The background is that, and I don't want to get ahead of your schedule, your agenda in 4.2, where you're talking about a town administrator, but the prior meeting, it spoke to the possibility of 19 hours a week for 8 weeks at $65 an hour or $100 an hour, and I'm doing the simple math, that could mean $10,000 or $15,000. And the question is, it's not in the budget for the current budget that we're in, so how would it be paid for? And in the question, I don't know that it's been formally asked, but it's been at least aired, would the reserve fund be a possible source for that funding? I wrote a long email where I weighed in personally, as a member of Finance Committee, but personally not the official voice of the Finance Committee, and I didn't share it with the Finance Committee because I didn't want to prejudice their own thinking. But the question is, that's a lot of money to take out of the reserve fund. That would be about 38% of our fund. Which, the other question is this an extraordinary and an unforeseen issue? Some would argue that it is a stronger argument, or at least an equally strong argument could be raised that it's not. If we spent it for this particular interim position, that would leave us with very little, with 9 months left in the fiscal year, with all possibility of things that could happen. Equipment falling in disrepair, water mains on West Street in particular, things that there's no other place to look to other than the reserve fund. But if it's gone for an interim town administrator, the question is is that the good and best use of that particular fund? And I raised the question, and I'm getting ahead of myself, but I've read the town administrator resumes, many of which are very impressive, but the takeaway that I got was that they were interim town administrators for 6 months, 8 months, 14 months, 4 years. None of them for 2 months. And the question is, do we need one for 2 months, or is there another more cost-effective way to do that without hitting the reserve fund? That doesn't mean that you can't make a request of the Finance Committee, formal request to use the reserve fund, and we'll debate it and discuss it at that particular meeting, which hasn't come to us in the way of a formal request yet. But I'm just suggesting, if we exhausted every possibility, to not do that.
Right.
That's the background. I think that's a good summation.
Yep. So, the first step in this was to put it out there and start to get the responses and ask for people's salary requirements, because when you're asking somebody to do essentially what's considered hourly we have sort of an interesting range of options available here. And understanding that this is an 8-week, give or take, period of time, and, we'll have to have a discussion at the select board level in terms of what we're actually looking for 8 weeks. Are we looking for somebody to really step in and be a town administrator for a short period of time? Or are we looking for somebody who can just keep the ship steered straight for that period of time? And that may, influence us one way or another. But if it comes down to needing to expend money from the budget, I think we need to do more work on our end in terms of figuring out where that money might exist from, in terms of looking at the current town administrator line item and seeing what, if any, money will be available there. And then we also have a fallback, if we need to, of potentially going to town meeting, because we do have a special town meeting now scheduled in November, and free cash certified that we could potentially use for this, if we wanted to go that route. Just putting it out as a potential option, not saying that I would push it at this point.
Yeah, but as it relates to the Finance Committee, one of the clauses when you were posting the position was to work with the Finance Committee during the budget process.
Correct.
And we're saying, don't hire the interim town administrator just for that purposes, just for us. I think our relationship with all the department heads and our unconditional respect for each one of them, we can make that work at the Finance Committee level. It would be nice to have somebody else there, but it's not necessary, and certainly not at the rate of $15,000 or more if it were the $125 per hour rate that you're talking about.
Right.
So if the select board has other reasons, that's not our purview. But if it's for our benefit, we would take a pass. I think we're fine working on our own.
Understood.
It is a critical time of the year, January and February, financially. That's without anything else that may come up. And there's other things that need to be dealt with that Heather's not going to have time to do before she leaves. So there's other things to do other than, but I do still think a town administrator should be part of the budget process for the 2 months. That's my thoughts. For the department heads to go to as well as the finance.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. It's a difficult time of year to be without a town administrator, and I think that's part of the thought process at select board level anyways, speaking for myself, and, in terms of making sure that there's a body in the seat who can help handle things. Because of course, a town administrator does a lot more than just attend meetings after hours, so.
To be sure.
Budget is whether you could have budgeted for it before. And so, in the case of a parental leave, we're not automatically budgeting for everybody to have a parental leave. And so I would argue that it is indeed an unforeseen circumstance. Extraordinary, I think, speaks really more to the amount. It's not something that we'd be able to fund otherwise, potentially. So, I would argue that it is extraordinary and unforeseen. because we aren't taking every employee and then adding 2 weeks, 2 months additional to their payroll in order to fund a potential parental leave. It's really not incumbent on any one of us to try to make a judgment of whether they would need that or not. So that's a tough argument. So I would just leave it there, but understanding that we have a lot more work to do on our end before we would consider making a request for a reserve transfer. But I appreciate the comments that you've made.
I guess one request I would have is when you do look at this, just understanding the ramp-up time for somebody to come into position, do meaningful work in a budget season, if they're not familiar with the town.
Yeah,
I think that helps, especially with a 2-month window.
right.
Understand
I agree.
how, I don't want to say this wrong, but how successful they'll be in
How effective.
negotiating.
Yep,
Exactly.
yep,
We realize that.
yep. Completely understood. And like I said before, somebody needs to be in that role to handle a lot more than just that, so.
Yep.
Okay, great. So anything else that we need to
No, I
deal
think
with
the
on a?
point's been made that you need to do your work, and if it comes to the Finance Committee in the normal process and method that a reserve fund request comes, we'll hold a meeting. But I think that's not the intent tonight. I don't think it's yours, it's not ours. So with that, I would probably entertain a motion to adjourn the Finance Committee.
Second.
Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Second, any discussion? Finance Committee stands adjourned.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for your valuable input again.
Okay.
All right, so I did see Judy Hadstadt come in, so we can move on to Judy to provide us a quick update on the Board of Health. When you're ready, Judy. Take your time. What's most comfortable for you? We can,
Okay. I've never been on speaker before. My name is Judy Hadstadt, and I'm Chair of the Board of Health right now. And I'm here to give a report of what the Board of Health's in the process of doing at the present time. And my job on the Board of Health is basically, I'm the nurse on the Board of Health. So I work collaboratively with DPH. Every day they fax me whether or not we have any cases in town. And if we do, whether or not I have to investigate them or just record them. And depending on the severity of what it is, it depends on how much I have to do for them. And so we're on, it's almost every day I hear from them, so. And on June 30th was the end of the fiscal year, and that was when I submitted a report to Heather that was all the communicable diseases that we had in Paxton for the whole year. And wasn't too bad till COVID hit, right?
you're killing me.
And Julia does the monitoring of all the COVID cases, and presently we're seeing a decrease. Reports monthly to us all the septic inspections and food inspections that he does in the businesses in town. He also submits perk test results and any new septic plans or local upgrades that we need to approve as a board. And then we come to emergency preparedness, which is always foremost in our minds, and we're expecting a fall drill anytime now. They'll be calling us and letting us know. And I give, on our regular Board of Health meetings, I give the reports of all the diseases we've had since the last meeting. And then after that, we address any issues that happen to come up if you've had any complaints or, people called or problems. I don't know, it was last couple of days ago.
Okay. All right, great.
Any questions?
Thank you, Judy. Any questions for Judy?
No, thank you, Judy. Thank you for the report.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you for coming in, and I'm so sorry poor Judy was waiting down at the COA because she didn't realize.
I got cold, you know, so I said, well, 7:30, they're not here. In college, if you had 15 minutes, the prof didn't come, you could go home. So I said, well, I'm going home. And then I went by here and I saw all the cars and I went, oh, no. So that's why I had called you, but of course you were here, you were in the
Right.
meeting, I suppose, because I waited till,
Who is this person?
thank you.
All right, thanks, Judy. If you're welcome to stay and watch the rest of the meeting, but there is, we totally aren't going to blame you
Sure,
for
now
not
I'm
wanting
warming
to.
up.
It's pretty warm in here.
Okay.
All right. So moving on, we have our consent agenda. We can just fly through this really quickly. There's 4 items on the agenda. Number 1 is to approve the meeting minutes from the regular meeting held on September 25th of 2023. Number 2 is a 1-day liquor license request from Anna Maria College for a Fall Fest celebration at the campus center to be held on October 22nd, 2023 from 5:30 to 8:30 p.m. Number 3 is to approve an award of FY 24-12 RML gutter replacement contract to Gutters by Mac in the amount of $15,000. And number 4 is to approve an award of FY 24-14 RML replacement of the low slope roof contract to FRG Contractor Corp. For $29,373. Any objections to any of the consent items?
No.
Hearing none, I declare that they have all been approved. I had one question. Is the Anna Maria College Fall Fest open to the public? Or is that just for students?
I don't think that's an open to the public event.
Okay, that's,
I've got it here. So
might be,
I thought it was something to do with the class of 24. Maybe that was something else. I thought
Yeah.
I thought I saw something.
I just want to make sure that we say it so that they're, because now
So
we've
they can
announced
advertise
it.
it,
So if it's not open to the public, I'd like to be able to say that it's not open to the. But let's move on to, you know what, we can just talk about the applications for the position of interim town administrator while we are waiting. And I think that's a good discussion to have now anyways. So you saw that there was 6 applications. I'll be interested to see what your thoughts are because again, we have quite a range here. So applications, we have received one from Jeff Wenzel from Davis Hill Road. We have one from Ross Perry, who I believe was previously town administrator in Sterling. We have Carter Terenzini, who was has done a few interim appointments, interim TA jobs, most recently in Boxborough. We have Charlie Blanchard, who you may recognize the name. He was our first town administrator here in Paxton. And then he went on to Southbridge, I believe.
Palmer.
Palmer. I see here,
He was
Southbridge.
the manager in Palmer, and then Southbridge, I think, is where he is now.
And Southbridge is where he is now. Okay. We have Gary Goldberg, who you may recognize from in town. And we have Greg Balukonis, who is currently the interim town administrator in Barry. And so really what we need to talk about tonight is what our next step is going to be, because we do have, the next option would be to interview in open session. We don't have a hiring committee set up for this because it is an 8-week appointment. And so we just need to decide of these 6 applicants, who we want to interview, if we want to make a decision, to not interview anybody, or if we want to interview all of them. I'd be interested in your thoughts.
I think we should keep his options open at this stage and maybe choose at least 2 or 3 to interview. Whether we go forward later on after we've interviewed each one, we might change his mind, or something may change his mind. But I think at this stage we should be going forth as we said we were going to do.
Mm-hmm.
Kirk?
My feeling is we need to define what we're looking for in a town administrator interim first, and then have a subsequent discussion based upon their applications as to what might be the best path that we
Right.
can take. That'd be my thought.
Yeah. Yeah, so I don't disagree with you, Kirk. I think that's an important discussion to have first. I can tell you, you know, as I mentioned earlier in the meeting, for an 8-week assignment, you know, it's gonna be tough to have any kind of high expectation, but I think we need somebody that can carry out the day-to-day tasks.
Someone who can come as close to plug and play as possible, which means they've been through the budget processes in towns. They've dealt with, you know, human resources issues in towns and snowstorms and et cetera and so forth. That said, I mean, I think it's also pertinent to decide how many hours are prudent to do the job and what our expectation is from that. You know, do they need 19 hours? Can they do it in 12 if we can somehow figure out how to take care of some of that slack ourselves? So and that all goes into, in my mind, defining what it is exactly we need, you know?
Yeah, because we had posted it for 19 hours. If we were to decide.
And during the budget season, I mean, that's not an unreasonable amount of hours to,
And I
it's
think
gonna take all that.
understanding too that we probably are going to need a little bit of feedback from Heather around what the priority will need to be.
Yep.
Especially on day-to-day type items, week to week, you know, sort of the recurring things, while she's out, and what she maybe would like somebody to focus on while she's out as well. And Heather, I'm not gonna put you on the spot with that. If you're there, right? Yeah.
I am here, yeah, it's okay. I have a list already going of what I do on a regular basis.
Oh, good. Honestly, I have a hard time looking at these 6 and saying, now granted, that's a long time. That's a lot of people to interview. But I have a hard time looking at this and saying there's anybody on here that I wouldn't want to hear from.
Exactly,
Yeah.
all of them could be capable of doing the job.
And we may get a better idea, not to put the cart before the horse, but we may get a better idea of what exactly we think this position might do well with or do best with by actually hearing from them first. And saying, okay, well, tell us how you would handle an 8-week assignment compared to, you know, the more normal, longer interim TA assignments. What would be your priorities? How would you manage that?
As I said before, something could come up every month. There could be a need to hire somebody at the department head. We don't know what could come up that 2 months. And it'd be nice to have somebody do that on a day-to-day basis instead of relying on one of us to do it.
Right.
So, I mean, we did talk about Donna taking on something, but I think she's got enough on her own plate. But did
Donna
mention
definitely has enough on her own plate.
that. We mentioned that last
Yeah.
meeting.
So I'm interested to hear what your thoughts are. I'd like to interview everybody, but you know, understanding that potentially is a long and horrible meeting or two.
Julia, one idea might be, and I wouldn't be super extensive with it, but if you want to get a better idea of people's position on a couple things, it might behoove you to think of, you know, 2 or 3 questions, and then we can have everyone respond to those 2 or 3 questions. And you'll get kind of an idea for what their feel is for things, and then maybe you can narrow it down from there, because I agree that I don't know if it makes sense to interview all 6 people. Mm-hmm. But if you can narrow it down based on how they answered, that might give you guys more of an idea of how they would respond to things and which top ones you'd be most interested in talking to.
That's not a bad idea. I can tell you that's my biggest question is, how do you intend to get up to speed in order to be effective during a short time frame like that, 8 weeks?
I think that's a really good idea, actually.
So why don't we do it this way? That'll be my question, and I'll let each of you have your own question.
Put it on the spot now.
I know, you don't have to think of it now.
Okay.
And then forward that along to Donna. And then we can forward that along to the candidates. Does that sound reasonable?
Mm-hmm.
And then maybe we can screen them a little bit that way.
Okay. Besides personally, I would like to just talk to 3, I think 6.
6 is a lot of interviews, yeah, I agree.
3 at the most, actually.
So why don't we do that? I've got my question out there, but by all means, if you can forward each of you a question that you think would help you to identify, which candidate you'd like to interview, then
Okay.
we'll proceed from there. I think that's reasonable. Okay, good. All right, so moving on, we have Fire Chief here. So why don't you give us a quick understanding about this issue with the generator? Pretend we know nothing about it.
All right. Good evening. Mike Pinchori, Fire Chief, Town of Paxton. Just to kind of give you guys a little background here, on September 27th, our generator failed to run its normal test. The crews were alerted by the alarm panel in the hallway. I got a call late at night saying the generator never ran. Our mechanic was here on duty. He checked it out real quick and it was dead. We called for service right away Thursday morning. They were here by 7:30 in the morning, which we were told the controls were fried. When they opened the controls up, they found that there was a mouse and 9 babies nested in the controls. So all the control boards inside there were essentially fried and shorted because of the things that mice leave when they nest. So we started with our normal company power-up generator. They then gave us a quote of $11,000 to repair it. We went out for 2 more quotes and subsequently higher. One was $15,000, and the next was $16,000 to repair this control board. In the meantime, I had to secure a rental backup generator from Sunbelt Rentals, which right now costs the town about $6,800 a month to have it there.
What does this generator do?
This generator powers this building in the event of a power outage. So everything inside this building, not just the lights, the radio system, so without it, we wouldn't have a radio system. It also powers the town server for the town hall. Any employee of the town using that server, plus all the Wi-Fi in all the town buildings and school. So if this were to go down, this is the central hub for all that technology and the fiber lines that run between here and Holden for regional dispatch. We would lose all that in a matter of minutes. The battery backups that those items have are only long enough so if the power goes out, the backup generator makes sure it comes on and it keeps that continuity. If we had to rely solely on the backup batteries for the radios and the server, it would only be 1 radio transmission or so and then it would be down. So that's why this generator is so important. Not only that, it runs this building, so fire suppression, fire alarms, jail cells, security controls, refrigerators with medications for EMS. So we had no choice but to kind of follow our emergency planning and get a backup generator in place. I did tried to exhaust the resources of the state, specifically the Department of Fire Services and MEMA, but they don't have a generator big enough to power the whole building that we need. And it just is not feasible for us to cordon off the building. The panels are tied into separate things at separate times, and it would be a nightmare trying to shut breakers here or there, and we just wouldn't be able to effectively use the building from that point forward. So we had to get a rental generators, 250 kW. Came from Sunbelt. It's going to cost us around $6,800 for the month. So at this point, I'd like to get this generator fixed as soon as possible. And that's why I'm here tonight, to kind of bring you guys up to speed. This unfortunate, unexpected event.
Okay. So as of right now, where are you at in terms of quotes and whatnot?
Got 3 quotes right now with the town administrator on the procurement side. Apparently, just got to go out to bid.
Say that again?
It's got to go out to bid.
It's got to go out to bid. Okay. So we got the 3 quotes in. We're just waiting now to go through sort of like the procurement process.
Yeah.
And I talked to Heather shortly before this meeting, and we're hoping to set up a meeting once we get those bids back in from the people that gave us quotes previously, so that we can then decide on the select board level, to award a bid on that, hopefully before the end of the week, this week. However, Kirk, I think, had a question about where that would leave us.
Just, so if we don't award until, say, Friday, where does that leave us as far as procuring the new board and having it in and getting the rental off?
So
That's tight.
That's the tricky part. The part itself is about 10 to 14 days out. All 3 companies that I got quotes from echoed that same sentiment. So that's going to push us close to that 1 month mark before we get this done. My goal was obviously to get this done last Monday when I got the final quote in, but due to some state laws and stuff, apparently we have to go out to bid.
Is there a way in the procurement to request expedited shipment of the new control panel as part of the bid?
Probably. I'm not the bid writer. I'm not the procurement officer, so.
But
That would be a
it's just
good
a
question
thought.
for Heather.
You know, if we have to pay an extra $200 or $300 to get it here in time to get that rental off
Yep.
by the end of the 30-day period, that would be something worth looking into.
If you can speak louder,
Oh, I'm sorry.
Heather can't hear you through the Zoom.
Okay. I can just hear the echo, that's why I just assumed.
Don't worry about the echo. There's a
Okay.
monitor in the back that, because sometimes some folks like to sit in the back and then complain that they can't hear. So,
That's a bridge we can cross once we
Okay.
make an award and have a conversation with the vendor.
Want me to kill that?
yeah, if you don't mind, maybe,
I thought I was talking too loud.
No, no,
My
no.
apologies. Sorry, everybody at home and on Zoom.
I mean, that's something that we can address, once we can procure or secure a vendor. But it's something worth probably looking at.
So what's the date that you've got the rental generators to?
We got it right away on the 28th.
No, what's the last date of it?
Would be, I believe, October 26th,
Okay.
that Thursday.
If we award, that would be,
So
it's gonna be really tight.
yeah, and what does it cost to, so we have the generator for a month. Do you have to get it for another full month, or?
no, we can get it by week, but the cost by week is significantly higher. It's not, it's about $4,400 per week versus the $6,800 per month. The way the sales people explain to me, they go about 2.5 weeks out, and then they set the rate
bump
for the
into the
month.
month.
Yeah.
Okay, so even if we were to only go another week, it's a significant expense.
It is. It's not something to be taken lightly, and it's not. it
So
was
days
not-
kind of count here.
yeah.
That's why I was talking about expediting the
Yeah.
parts.
So is it already out for bid?
Heather, can you give us an update on what the bid situation is?
Yeah, so we applied for a DCAM waiver on Friday afternoon, came through today. So when you do a DCAM waiver, because it is something that's attached to the building, it's under chapter 149, you have to ask permission. You have to either ask for the entire process or just the advertising process. The only part we asked for a waiver on was the advertising process. The difference would be that we'd have to, post this Thursday in the Central Register, and then it wouldn't get published until next Wednesday, and then it would have to be 2 more weeks. So you're looking at 3 weeks before you could even do anything. So they were happy to waive that piece. Mike complied initially with, getting the 3 different quotes, reaching out. The concern, we want to make sure that we hit is making sure that they're including prevailing wage. We did pull the book on prevailing wage, and a generator that is physically attached to the building and is not considered portable does have prevailing wage apply, because the question was whether or not it was a prevailing wage job or if it was something that was similar to like a mechanic. It's weird, but they differentiate those. So because of that, we did under chapter 149. We requested things. It took me a while to get things together on my end, so I didn't get it out till late on Friday with holiday on Monday. It kind of held people up. So as of right now, we need to push when things are due back. And I was just waiting for the select board to see when they could meet. We could always do an emergency meeting. Otherwise, I'd recommend, either Thursday evening, which at this point, it would probably be a late meeting, or first thing on Friday morning, and then award it right away and get them moving. I think one of Mike's biggest concerns is, as of right now, based on what part everyone seems to think is the main part that needs to be fixed, it's a 2-week lead time.
Yeah, and we don't know if there's any way to expedite getting the part.
I can check, I can make phone calls tomorrow, see if we can't expedite that. So-
Yeah. So Heather, the DCAM waiver, can you explain that just so everybody has a good understanding of what that is?
Yes, but if you make me pronounce what the acronym stands for, I'm going to do a horrible job. So DCAM is a agency at the state, and they oversee a lot of construction projects pertaining to like pre-approving bidders and so forth. But one of their powers, so to speak, under the Massachusetts general laws with Chapter 149 or construction projects is approving emergency relief from certain requirements, right? Like, let's say that, we were one of those towns out in Western Massachusetts or even Leominster, where, the water came in and took out like the whole floor of the building. We would be lucky to even be able to solicit 3 quotes before we had someone come in and kind of seal things off. So we'd be doing a waiver after waiver. It's I wouldn't say it's an extensive process. I think I sent it to all the select board members on my email on Friday. It's a 2-page letter. You have to hit all of their requirements, explaining what you're doing for each things, acknowledging that you're still following all of the laws where applicable, prevailing wage, OSHA compliance, et cetera, et cetera. You have to explain what you are doing to the best of your ability to comply. A lot of times we're just waiving the requirements of the advertising. If you remember back last year in November, we did this for the boilers at the library. Mm-hmm. And again, we just got the waiver for the advertising. It's not the easiest process to go through DCAM. That being said, they're always trying to work with us as much as they can, based on what their laws and their rule book says. So they were willing to do that, and like I said, we got the waiver back today, that they've approved the the advertisements.
Yeah, they've
Piece.
approved to waive the advertising requirement for procurement.
Yes, as far as the timeline goes. So we still
Okay.
had to post, like, on Friday, I still had to post in Combis. I still had to post on the town's website. We still had to email it out. But at least we didn't have to go through the 3-week process on Central Register.
Okay. So where do we stand now?
So what I would say is, if the board can give me a time when at least 2 out of 3 of you are available, at this point, it would be a really late meeting on Thursday night, because you have to do 48 hours, and we could try as an emergency meeting, but I don't think it will fly. Or we could do it on Friday morning, first thing in the morning. Earlier the better, just so that we can get in touch with the vendor and get them rolling.
Okay.
But we can also, if we get bids in, if we just have to push the date back for when we want people's quotes. If we push it back to, let's say Thursday afternoon, we can, already give a heads up to the person who we believe is the obvious lowest bidder, that you guys are meeting on Friday morning to approve the award. And then as soon as we get the approval of the award, we get the contract to them in the email in a matter of minutes.
Okay. And can you explain, we got the 3 quotes in, so why is it that we have to go out to bid?
So it's not going out to bid, it's following the process. So the process required by chapter 149, when there's a project that is between 10,000 and 50,000, you have to solicit written bids through a written description of services to at least 3 vendors who are in the normal course, and you need to receive 2 back. So we did get quotes from them. We didn't have a written thing. One of the things we've run into problems with in the past are twofold. Number one is if you don't write down what you want, you're getting potentially different things from different vendors. So like if you look at the quotes, one quote just says, yeah, we'll fix your generator. One quote says, we'll fix your generator. Here's the cost of the labor. Here's a list of 20 parts. Here's a miscellaneous line. Here's the cost of our travel. Here's the cost of this. And the other one says, similar variation in programming. You need to make sure that we're actually getting the same thing. We ran into this. Best example you can use for this is street painting. We did this last year. We originally just had a written letter. We sent it to everyone, and they sent us back things that we could not compare. It was not apples to apples. You could not make sense of who the lowest one is. Understanding that it's a maintenance project and other things could go wrong and there could be something else and it may not be the board that does it, you still have to do apples to apples. The second piece is we can't confirm any other way without sending it to everybody and having everyone acknowledge it, that people are actually using prevailing wage. If they are not a sole proprietor or do not own 50% or more of the shares of the company, they're required to do prevailing wage. Prevailing wage audits are becoming more and more prevalent, and we want to make sure that we're always complying, and there's no other way to ensure that they are in fact adding prevailing wage. Some people will say yes they are, but they're not. Once you send them the sheet and say, okay, you're going to have to sign off on this payroll compliance at the end of the day once you submit your bill, they tend to make sure that they're doing what they're supposed to be doing. And we cover our butts.
So they have to supply certified payroll, basically,
Yeah, they do.
showing that they're
Yeah.
actually paying the rate.
Well, you know
Yeah.
that. Yes, they do.
Yeah. So, and the reason I'm asking all these questions is because of the concern where we are looking at the potential of only a few days' time of having to pay for another month of generator usage. And so I want to make sure that everybody understands why it is that we may have to pay for another month of generator usage, because we have to sort of jump through all of these hoops. And it's not because any one of us has, done something or not done something appropriately.
So we're just trying to get through the process as fast as we can.
Yep. So it's an unfortunate barrier that we have here, that's going to end up costing us more money, unfortunately, from the sounds of it.
Maybe.
Potentially, yeah. So what are we looking at for a total dollar amount?
Depends on who you get at this point to put the bid in. So our quotes ranged anywhere from 11,000 to 16,000. We're at 6,800 right now for the rental, and around $2,500 for the electrician who had to come out and hook up the rental. So we are, if we are on the high side, if we only get 2 of those quotes back, I guess I should use the word quote, not bid, but if we get 2 of those quotes back, and it's the $15,000 or the $16,000 one,
27.
we're looking at about $26,000, all said and done. If it's the lower one for 11, and that's correct,
Yep.
we're right around 20. So that's, and then if we have to go another month of generator rental, we're between 26 and 32,000.
So this potentially is up to, on the high side, could be $32,000.
Yes.
So Heather,
So why
Yeah.
my concern with the time is of the essence.
right. Yep. Heather, you have any ideas for funding?
So the only thing we've talked about for funding, Mike and I bounced a couple ideas back and forth. The initial source, we do have enough money in the public safety complex building budget to initially cover it. It would 100% meet the requirements of extraordinary and unforeseen for reserve fund transfer. Downside being, again, they only have 40K for the year. Option 3 is, you can look at ARPA, but looking at ARPA about 20 minutes ago, it looks like our unreserved balance right now is 9,000, but we have to keep 5,000 aside for the single audit on the year that the fire truck comes in. So that would leave us with 4,000 there. When I did initial calculations earlier today, our custodian line is also in the town buildings line. And based on the first 3 months of the year and how much we should have used versus what we've used, we probably have about $3,000 we can transfer out, at least at this time, over to that line to help cover some of this. And then the last option is something you guys have already talked about a little bit for the town administrator interim position, which is taking potentially from or transferring from free cash that was recently approved at town meeting, a portion or some thereof.
That we're waiting till November.
Right. Yeah, would it be an option, Heather, if we had to transfer out of reserve, to then replenish reserve from free cash?
At town meeting.
I mean, you could do that, but the problem you're gonna run into at this point, right, is once you guys approve and say, okay, we're gonna pay for the generator repairs, part of the contract, which is a really good portion of the contract, has a clause that the town accountant signed saying what account it's coming from and that there's sufficient funds. So you can't pull from reserve fund because you'd have to get a reserve fund request to the FinCom and have it approved prior to the contract. So you're gonna wanna pull from the public safety building line right away because that has sufficient funds for that piece. We can do an internal transfer, like I said, from the custodian line to that line and add more money to it. And then go directly to the FinCom for a reserve fund request. And we can always replenish the reserve fund as well at town meeting at the transfer of free cash.
But the reserve fund is an account.
The reserve fund is an account, Carol says.
So
Yeah.
it's got a number to it, so that could be put on the town accountant could put that.
It is, but I don't think you're gonna get FinCom to meet in the next 48 hours to approve a reserve fund transfer for that amount of money that we don't know what the amount certain is.
I didn't think we were.
So the question that I have is, what is the total budget for the public safety building account, or for the public buildings account, I guess?
What's left?
It would, I think it would leave Mike for the building with like, what, $2,000 at the end of the day? If we were on the high amount, Mike, something like that?
Yeah, if we don't have to go another month of rental, it's right around 2,000. We are at 28,000, or will be at the end of this week once the warrants are all done, in that line item. And part of that's due to unforeseen expenses to the HVAC system back in July. So we're not even in the heating season in this building. So it's going to be tough.
So here's the question that I would have is, if we expend pretty much all of the public safety building account on the generator, what happens to the other things that would have necessarily been paid out of that account that it would be displaced by this? So I
Yes.
assume that there's things. Are there things?
There are several things that we still have not done that we normally do on an annual basis. We are still up for our vehicle exhaust removal service. We get that 2 times a year. That's $2,700. Our fire suppression sprinkler system inspection, that's around $1,700 for the year. Our fire alarm monitoring and inspections, that's another $1,200. Our fire extinguisher inspections throughout the whole building, that's another $1,500. You're gonna laugh, but our generator inspections, we have to have that done. The PMs done, a big PM once, and then a check again in December. So we're up for the small one in December. You know, we can probably wrap that into this repair for the December one, but the oil change and stuff comes in May. Our HVAC service and repair, like I said, we've already spent $5,000 out of that $12,000 line on AC repairs. in July.
So, let me just stop you.
Yep.
Is there any amount of that money that wasn't already obligated to something else? In terms of the budget for?
No,
Okay,
no, well, we have a line for building repairs, and we've already used 2,300 out of that for
what, and what's
repairs around the
the
building.
amount of that line item?
What's that?
What's the amount of that line item?
It's right around 4,800, I think. That's the general repairs.
So about
That's-
half of it,
Yeah.
okay.
So
So-
Matt, you've already spent the 6,800 come out of your account?
Not yet. We haven't, it's a net 30 on that, so.
Okay. So, I'm gonna ask a question of you, Mark.
Should have committed together.
I know. If I had, I wasn't even thinking along those lines. So, if there are items that are displaced out of that budget because of an extraordinary and unforeseen expense, does that qualify as extraordinary and unforeseen, in your opinion, from a reserve fund perspective?
Yeah, I took a couple notes as Mike and everybody was talking. First of all, this has got to be taken care of immediately. And we don't want to get into the area of procurement, that's not our venue, but you need to take care of it. So perhaps you use the public safety complex budget in order to take care of it immediately, and then as the need throughout the year surfaces that you need money in that account that you don't have because you used for this emergent issue, I think that would be an item for the reserve fund for consideration. I don't think the timing has to be aligned perfectly. It's happening after the fact because something that occurred previously didn't have the luxury of holding a meeting and making a presentation. So the other thing is, I don't want to delay the issue, but I wouldn't want to lose track of the Capital Improvement Planning Committee, that they should be kept abreast of this or informed. It doesn't have to go to town meeting, but nevertheless, I think that this might be something that, at least as a courtesy to that particular committee, to let them know that it's an improvement, it's a refurbishment, it's a major repair. Those things, I think, fall under our purview as well. I suggest that not in the way of delaying it any further. I think the message this evening is take care of whatever needs to be done to take care of it immediately, and let's worry about the reserve fund and CIPC later on.
All right, because I think it sounds like there's a number of things that you're expecting to come up that could end up being a lot of requests to,
Well, if we could, and I can work with Mark on this offline, because maybe we can just do it like a quarterly
yeah,
thing, if that's something that FinCom were amenable to. Worst, however we want to do it. It's
Yeah.
up to you guys and FinCom, so.
because these things are they required by contract? Are we already? wrote-
There are a few things on here that are required by contract. Most of these inspections, third-party inspections that are done and service and maintenance that are done to this building are required by our, loan that was used to build this building initially. So the federal government, and they do come out, I think it's every 5 years, to inspect the property.
Okay.
So, I know there was a time back that we did have an inspector in here to make sure that we were keeping up on everything. Yeah.
Yep.
Yep.
Okay. Any questions on the generator issue?
No. Volunteer boot brigade at the stoplight?
Seriously, right?
No, I'm not.
Any
I'm only
questions
half
from-
kidding.
Obviously not something we wanted to have to deal with. You mentioned that it gets serviced twice a year. I mean, I guess it's just one of those things. There's nothing you can do.
Where the mouse, or the mice, I should say, were, I would have never expected in 100 years.
Yeah.
It's a pretty tightly sealed box, and they were in there nesting away. So that's it.
That's right. They were safe. Yep.
It was.
Yep.
The exterminator?
They have been evicted. Yes.
Yeah, they've been evicted.
Yeah.
And Heather, you did look into insurance, right, on this to see if there was any insurance coverage? just to,
Yes, I emailed
Check that box.
Joanne Stahl from Maya. I don't remember the specific language. Mike, I think I forwarded to you. I don't remember if you remember, but I know her answer was
Yeah.
no.
It wasn't
I
quite
think it was
an
a
act
summary.
of God, it was under
it's just a non-covered,
a non-covered wear and tear, I believe was the words, but,
okay.
Active rodent.
you know, after 15 years, I guess so.
Okay. Well, it's a thing. Unfortunately, we have to deal with it. So, all right. So thank you for providing that. I think it was important for everybody to hear what the situation is there, so that we can kind of deal with it going forward and everybody's eyes wide open, as to what the problem is. So,
I just looked at her email and she said that rodent damage is an excluded peril. I
okay.
think was the word.
Vermin.
Is. So, I'll just,
Thank you.
I'll let you know that I'm available anytime.
Okay.
For a meeting. I don't care if it's 11:59 Thursday night, I'll be available.
Thank you, Kirk. I've got some like day-to-day kind of appointments coming up, but I know we can obviously coordinate times offline, but as far as Thursday evening is concerned, I'm available anytime. Friday morning, I'm available until 9 a.m. and then not again until after 11.
Could we do Friday at 8 a.m. so we can do it ASAP on Friday morning?
Does
Does that work for everyone on Zoom?
I've already told.
Carol?
No, I'm not available.
Carol's not available
Yeah.
Friday at 8
Or
a.m.
Thursday
or Thursday.
evening, no.
Is that something that you'd be comfortable with us
Yeah,
handling?
absolutely. Needs to
Okay.
be done, yep.
Okay. So Kirk is available. I can be available.
We do the 7:45, so at 8:01, the email could go out.
Yeah.
Would that make you more happy,
No,
Kirk?
I'm
We can do
just kidding.
7:45. It's on Zoom.
Doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter to me. Anytime Friday morning before 9 is fine with me. So, and
Okay.
you may catch me in my pajamas, but as long as you don't care.
You can leave your video off.
They
I don't
have
think
to.
anyone wants to see it. Except for Mike.
All right, good. So we'll plan on, what time do you think? 8 o'clock
That's
on Friday? All right, so we'll plan that. So if we can get that posted, 8 a.m. on Friday, for a meeting to award bids on the generator. And it's by Zoom, yep. Yeah, use the usual link, right? Yep, because we'll need to use that one. Thank you. All right. So next up is acceptance, the next step in acceptance of Olivia Knoll as a public way. I don't really understand the way the agenda item is written, so Heather, I'm just going to kick it to you.
Sure. So, Olivia Knoll, as people may recall, this has been a subdivision that's been ongoing for years, back and forth at the planning board. So we checked, and Donna was fantastic. She still had all of the information that Brian Folk from American Economy sent us early spring of what we need to do next steps. So as everyone probably recognizes, this eventually has to get onto the special town meeting in November if we're ever going to accept this as a public way, or it could wait till May, but it does need to get onto the agenda. One of the legal steps is that based on that fun verbiage you have before you, Julia, it's essentially the select board saying, yes, we intend to make this or push this forward to become or go to a vote to become a public way. And to do this, we have to push it to the planning board officially for them to report back. So that's all the language on the agenda item is. And I know it seems really weird because the planning board's been working on this whole time. But it's just the way the law currently is and what we're required to do. So if everyone is okay with it, Donna got the last of the deed and clear title today. So we have all that from the contractor. So we're good to go. So unless the select board has any reservations about pushing this to the planning board, my recommendation would be for someone to make a motion to mirror the language that's on the item on the agenda.
I'll make a motion to mirror the language of the item on the agenda and to push this to the planning board.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right, good to go. Next up is a request to use the training room for the zoning discussion for CMRPC. This is through the ZBA. Is this would this be a ZBA meeting, Heather?
No.
Or this
So,
planning?
this has to do with the earmark funds. So if you remember, we got the earmark for $75,000. We contracted with CMRPC for the purposes of redoing our zoning bylaws, as well as looking at the MBTA zoning requirements for rural adjacent MBTA communities. The very first piece that they're on is the MBTA bylaw that's required as part of the law. We do have some time to get this through, but we want to start the discussions and conversations early. The idea is to use the public safety room for this presentation because it's the best for public input, allows us to use a Zoom interface as well, easier for Scott to record it, also put it live on YouTube. It's also one of those things that we're hoping that as we continue going through the other zoning bylaws and as we do information sessions on each, as well as planning board hearings on each, if we are able to utilize the place that is the training room, it will be, I think, a much better video quality and so forth. The goal is to eventually compile all these videos onto one page on the town's website so that when we come time for a town meeting and towns be able to vote on this material, they can go and click on those specific links so they can watch the information as it was revealed in detail. One of the important parts about the MBTA part of having the interactive dialogue is it is looking at taking certain locations of time of the town and saying, okay, yes, you know, these are places that would comply with the requirements of the law. And these are places that, you know, if we were to designate them as such, someone could come along someday or maybe absolutely never and transfer that property and be able to build places that are much closer together and within certain requirements. So it's an important thing. I do not currently have a date for it, but if the select board was okay with it, I would, if you guys are in support of that idea, if I could get approval, pending approval with the two chiefs, I think it would be a huge benefit to the town for people to have a nice forum to come in. And this is going to be I think, a very contentious issue. We want to make sure everyone is heard on this and everyone has an opportunity to opine.
And is this a single meeting, Heather, or do you expect multiple?
Well, this meeting would be a single meeting. As we move forward with the steering committee and, you know, interact further with planning and ZBA and so forth, you know, we'll have other zoning bylaw sections that will probably want to follow a similar format to what we do with the MBTA. But this is the very first one, so I don't have any additional details for the other ones coming at this time.
Okay. Any other questions on this?
I have no objection.
I have no objection.
No.
Yep, I agree. It does seem like the best place to do that. So pending approval of the chiefs, can we have a motion?
Make a motion pending the approval of the chiefs to allow the CMR's PC meeting to happen at the safety complex.
Okay.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, good. All right. Moving onward. We have a request from the Boy Scouts to use the town common for a bottle and can drive on October 14th, 2023 from 9 a.m. to 12 p.m. This was originally in the consent agenda, but I got to thinking about this after the last time the Boy Scouts came in. And when we have a group that's using the town common for something, I think it's nice for us to give them a little bit more notice or, you know, airtime, if so to speak, during our meeting to help get the word out that this is happening. So that's why I asked for it to go under new business. So you have the town common use application. This is, as we said, the Boy Scouts. It would be a bottle and can drive from 9 a.m. to 12 p.m. On the town common. It has been approved by the police department and the fire department / emergency manager. And did I give the date again? October 14th, 2023. Is there a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right. So we got that a little bit extra information out. And then set date and time for trick or treat is the last item on our new business agenda. I talked to Mark Savasta, our police chief. He was fine with our usual, which would be doing trick or treat on the day of Halloween, which this year is a Tuesday from 5 p.m. to 8 p.m., which is our usual course. Every time we talk about this, I express my concern about trick or treating during rush hour. It is what it is. It sounds to me like most people in the community would rather keep things as they are rather than change anything. And so if that is the will of the community, then that is my will as well, because that's what I'm here to do. So 5 p.m. to 8 p.m. on October 31st.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, good. All right, I have nothing under old business. Under correspondence, I wanted to make mention of the Lions Club, which is hosting their usual Halloween party and bonfire, which will be happening down by Illigs on October 31st on Halloween. My understanding is it's 6 to 8 p.m., I believe. And so don't quote me on the time frames, but I think that's correct. We usually have volunteers from the Leos, which is a student organization over at the high school that works with the Lions Club. They come down, and our local Lions Club volunteers pass out candy and popcorn and hot apple cider from the snack shack that is down by Illigs, along with having the bonfire with assistance from the fire department. It's a lovely time every year, and so I encourage everybody to come on down. It won't disappoint. There will also be a hayride. I think that's important. A hayride, which is sometimes haunted. So that's a fun time as well for the kiddos. So I hope to see you there. I go every year. Okay. Any other correspondence? I don't think so. So Heather, you're up with the town administrator's report.
So, in light of me, I think I'm just gonna defer to the written version. I'll post it on the website tomorrow with any of the updates, including trick or treat. But are there any questions from the board?
No.
I have none.
I read through it.
Okay. All right, great. So with that, I have no public anymore. We have scared them all away. So we are going to go ahead and enter into executive session. So I need a motion for us to move into executive session, to return to regular session, only to adjourn the meeting.
So moved.
He's very smart. All of those in favor, we need a roll call vote. Kirk, how do you vote?
Aye.
Carol, how do you vote?
Aye.
And I will vote aye.
It's just easier to defer.